Welcome to Papa's Workshop. In the beginner series, I have always tried to show tools that will be able to get you up and started in your shop that will help you be able to make the projects and be able to grow with this hobby. The table saw is one such tool that you have to have in your shop, and many people make all types of different jigs, including myself. Well, one of the tools that I want to be able to show you today is the miter gauge, often very misunderstood, and sometimes not as accurate as you may think that it is. So let's get started. So you have a very new, modern, and accurate miter saw gauge, and then you have the old. What came with the saw is not very accurate. Now granted, this table saw is over 50 years old, but if you look at this miter gauge, look at the play that you have. It slides left and right rather easily, and that makes for inaccurate cuts. Now when this moves, this scale is not real accurate, and these set screws are actually designed to be able to do it. And quite frankly, I never really used them a lot because they were not that accurate. One of the old tricks that I used to use and was taught when I was very young, the quickest way to be able to set this to a perfect 90 degrees was just to flip over the miter gauge, put it in the slot, and run it up against the rail for the fence and tighten it. And then you were done. And to check that theory, let's go ahead and grab a square and let's see how accurate we are. Now when I need an accurate cut, I just use the drafting type triangles to be able to get it square. So if I put that down and look at this, and I want to get in real close so that you can see this. Now I want to zoom in real close. You can see that that method works real well because that put it right at a perfect 90 degrees. And that's only going to happen if your saw is set up accurate. Now, as far as the 45s, we can do the same thing. Now, if I want to do this with a 45 degree angle, it's the same thing. All I need to do is just put this against the blade, loosen this, and slide it right up until it touches. Just like that, tighten it back down, and I have a 45 degree angle. Now for me, this is the most accurate way to be able to set it up using these old miter gauges. Now this only works if you have the triangles. Now there are some aftermarket items that you can buy that have various degrees. And again, this is a workaround. Those little set screws are not that accurate. And those aftermarket gauges work well, but they're still trying to correct the basic problem of an inaccurate miter gauge. So for that reason, I don't use them. Now this method only works with a very limited number of degrees. So if you have a 45 and 90 triangle, works good. Same thing if you have a 30 and a 60 degree triangle, you can use it. But what happens with all the other measurements that you need and the angles that you need? This is not going to work. So you need an alternative. You need to be able to solve the problem of all this movement. We need to be able to have this be able to set up accurately on many different angles. For the woodworking today, that's very important. And with all the problems of the traditional miter gauge that you get with the table saw, a lot of people, including myself, have gone to the table saw sled because this gives you the advantage of being very accurate with this particular fence. You can get it tuned in to the point where it's virtually perfectly square within a thousandth or a couple of thousandths of an inch, and that's not bad. You have the ability to add a stop block, and that is very handy to be able to have. Another option is you can add other jigs. This is an example of a jig where I have set it up so that you can cut multiple degrees, starting with 15, 18, 20, 22 and a half, 30 and 36 degrees. And that definitely helps. But keep in mind, all of these different jigs add up to a lot of weight and extra space that's taken up in your shop. So if you're a wood turner, these types of jigs are helpful. But why not eliminate all of these jigs and get back to the basics of what the root problem is get rid of an inaccurate miter gauge. Another disadvantage of this old traditional type miter gauge is that you're so far from the blade. This is a lot of room. And when you're this far away from the blade, you can have all types of potential accidents. So again, this is just a really poor design. Now over time, what people did, they would take a scrap piece of wood and attach it to the miter gauge. And that way they could control it. They could set this up right next to the blade, or they could literally slide it over and make a zero cut and cut into it. And that's worked fairly well, but again, that's a workaround to the basic problem of the miter gauge itself. What I want to do with this is show you a brand new modern type of design of miter gauge that has eliminated every problem that I have just described. So it does have very accurate settings here on a wide variety of different angles, and it eliminates the slop that you have in this track by these little washers right here. So if I go ahead and set this up and slide it in, if there's any movement at all, then you can take the Allen wrench and adjust this ever so slightly, tightening this up to the point where there is no slop at all. And then it works very smoothly. And that's what you're looking for. You don't want to have that. So now this slides through very easily. And if you need to make an adjustment, that's real easy to be able to do. Now this is the fence that comes with this, and that also solves the problem of having to add a secondary wooden fence to those old miter gauge. In addition, this one has a box making attachment right here that is going to be very useful. But for right now, I'm going to go ahead and take this off. Now I remove that portion of the little jig for the box makers. And I want to be able to go ahead and put these two nuts in here so I can attach the fence to the miter gauge. And this with the T-track makes it very simple. All I need to do is just slide these two nuts down to the approximate location where they need to be, and then I'll just bring it over to the miter gauge. And it's very, very easy to line up. All you have to do is just set it down, slide the screw into it, and tighten it up. To be able to see the backside, you can easily see the nut, and all you have to do is just put that screw in that washer in and tighten it down. I have a set screw right here, and I've got another one on the other side. That is so I can adjust to make sure that the fence is square. That's something that the old miter gauges just didn't have. So let's go ahead and make that adjustment now. Looking at this with the triangle, I can get right down here and you can see there is no gap whatsoever. This is very, very accurate. Now when I'm adjusting this, I like to use the triangle also just to make sure that it's perfectly accurate. So I have it aligned. I know it's perfectly square. I can just go ahead and tighten that on each side. That is perfect. And then from there, I can tighten these. And now that fence is perfectly square. Now with this set right here, you can see you can set it up very close to the saw blade. And that way, when you're cutting, you can use that as the support and make your cut. And that's a lot safer to be able to have that support there, and you don't have just a scrap piece of wood that's not going to be accurate. Now when you're ready to cut a piece of wood with this fence installed, this fence now gives the support to that block much, much safer. To make the repeated cuts, you also have an attachment for this stop block. Let me go ahead and put this on. Now again, I'm going to take the little nut, slide it in, and I can just slide that right over on top of it. Put this washer back on, Drop that in and screw it in. Now I can slide this over, set it up where it needs to be set if I want to make the repeated cuts. Tighten that down, and I'm ready to make the cut. And I have now accurate cuts that I can repeat over and over. If I want to get that out of the way for a long piece, easy enough. Just raise up the handle and you've got it. And that makes it where you can slide this around and set it up anywhere that you need to have it. So how accurate is this gauge? Is there any slop in this? So I'm loosening this. This is also loose. I'll get that out of the way. So this can now turn freely. So I'm going to set this back at the 0. That goes right into the slot, and I'm going to tighten this. Is there any movement? There is no movement at all. Now if I want to be able to adjust this, let's look, this is still loose. And now I have all of these very different slots that this will fit in. If I just want to slide it over to a 45, that just slides right in. Tighten it, I can tighten it. So let's check it with this triangle and see if it's actually 45 degrees. So we'll take the triangle right against the saw blade. We'll slide that down and let's take a look. That is absolutely perfect. There is no gap at all. So for all the wood turners out there and for the people who need very accurate cuts, this will do it. You don't need all the different fancy jigs. So let's go ahead and make another adjustment down to a 30 degrees. I'm gonna go ahead and loosen this knob. I'll loosen this knob, pull that back. We'll bring that down to 30 degrees. Slide that right into position. Tighten it, tighten this, and let's check that with our other triangle. So again, I have my triangle. I'll slide it right against the blade. Come right down to this fence and look at that. That is absolutely perfect. We'll try one more. Let's do this 60 degree. So I'll loosen this again, pull this out. Go ahead and rotate, whoops, gotta loosen this one. Rotate this over to the 60 degree. Drop that in place, tighten it, and then let's test it out. Now again, the triangle is right against the saw blade, and that's perfectly smooth there. Then we look it over at the fence on the miter gauge and look at that, and that is absolutely perfect. So the accuracy is definitely there in this new, modern, up-to-date miter gauge. So this is going to be my go-to miter gauge from now on, and I can just not use a lot of those jigs that I have, because this is just as accurate as the shop-made jigs. To attach the box jig back onto it, all I need to do is just take these two little small nuts and slide those right into the T-track. Once that's done, then I can just go ahead and screw it on. Then I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm just going to take it and align these. And put that right there. The alignment is right where it needs to be. Drop that in place and then tighten it down. And then I'll slide this over, put it right over the nut for this one. And then with this, and with the washer and the screw, we'll drop it right in place and tighten it down. Definitely much easier to do it sitting on the table saw rather than trying to hold it in the air and do it. Now the beautiful thing about this, when you set this up, you can set it up to any thickness box joint that you want. So you get the distance that you want, and then you can just tighten it down, and you're ready to make your box joints. And I think what I'm going to do is a whole video just making the box joints on the table saw rather than the CNC machine. So you don't want to miss out on that video. But that is now attached. The other thing that you can do, these bars right here can be adjusted. I can loosen these. And I can move these also to be able to get some extra distance that I would want to have. So again, this is an extremely versatile tool. You have this notch out here, so if you wanted to set that up, move this out of the way, you could have it set up where the blade could pass through this area, and you could have support on the other side too. So again, a lot of different options. I'm going to go ahead and put this back onto the miter gauge. Now I know I'm going to include this in the beginner series, but I'm also, hopefully, everybody else will be able to see the advantage of having a good miter gauge. It is extremely useful in the shop, and it eliminates all those other bulky, hard to store jigs that I've used for the years and years and years. Now I'm going to put a link in the description below should you want to be able to look at this closer. And this jig does come from Banggood, which so far all of the products that I have received from them have been outstanding. Now keep in mind, it does take a little time to be able to get to you because the shipping is being what it is today. But once you get the product, I think you'll be very impressed with whatever that you choose from them. I know I'm very, very pleased with this miter gauge, and I am literally putting all these other jigs onto the shelf. Thank you for watching today. I really appreciate that you coming and visiting my channel, and I hope that you were able to learn something. The table saw is a cornerstone of the entire shop, no matter what type of tools that you have. And being able to make those accurate cuts is critical. So you have to have an accurate miter gauge, an accurate fence, and if you choose to have jigs to be able to make those specialized cuts, you have to have those accurate as well. And above all, safety is the most important thing. So if you liked this video today, if you learned a few new things, please go ahead and give me a like and go ahead and subscribe right down there and hit that little bell notification next to it so that you'll be notified on the different videos that I'm uploading. And I look forward to seeing each and every one of you in the next video that I have, whatever that may be.